just want to raise that, MLA went on this journey, probably 18 months ago now, I suppose, probably a bit longer. We went into this field not knowing too much. So it shows you where we've come from in a short period of time. Some really valuable insights from Darren, and obviously, it's the way we deliver, the adoption of this technology. Dave Packer spoke about it earlier today, but how we're utilising levies to make it a little bit easier for producers to understand this area, because there's a lot out there, and MLA is de-risking this area for your producers, and Darren's obviously passionate about the area, and very happy to take anyone to come up and have a yarn to Darren about what the opportunities are and going forward. I just hope that we continue to see the benefits we're getting, showing the return on investment, the value propositions to our red meat industry. Moving on from Carwoola, as I said, a lot of people we've seen at Romani yesterday. Our next presenter, David Lee, is a General Manager of Windy Station, Romani. David has 25 years of agribusiness experience across Eastern and Western Australia, covering both pre- and post-farm gate livestock and crop production industries. David currently holds the position of General Manager at Windy Station for Romani Pastoral Company and has been in this role since 2017. Windy Station consists of two properties covering 21,000 hectares, 21,500 hectares, located on the Liverpool Plains near Corindi in New South Wales. Business supports a self-replacing beef herd with a capacity of 10,000 DSEs and dryland winter and summer cropping. Previous to the role at Windy, David had 4 years in Western Australia working in a corporate grain production business. He has also had previous roles in agribusiness, banking and finance. David has a strong understanding of the Australian agribusiness and agricultural business management. Key areas of knowledge and interests include livestock, broadacre crop production and operations, human resource development and importation and integration of digital technology, which we're really keen on, into the agricultural business. He is passionate about the industry and its people, and that's why we are working with these two people to the left of me. And I would now like to introduce David to the stage to talk about the installation at Romani. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Daryl. It's nice when you write your own bio, get a good introduction. Firstly, before I start, I'd just like to thank, on behalf of Romani Pastoral Company, MLA, for the opportunity to be involved in the digital livestock pilot, or the next step of. We think it's going to be an exciting opportunity for us as a business, and we're hoping we take some really valuable information out of it, but also the opportunity to then allow that information to be shared amongst the industry. Wind back pre the start of the digital pilot, and we were in the position that maybe some of you in the audience are looking at implementing some technology into the business, and it's a pretty overwhelming space when you get into it. I was looking for some opportunities within the space, and it was quite hard to find the answers that were there. So hopefully we can do some trialling and of some of the technology, and it can be applied to your businesses. I'll just speak. I'll spend a bit of time speaking about Romani Pastoral Company as a group, then a lot more detail on Windy, because obviously I'm involved there and know that property in more detail. So I'll give you an idea of what we do and why we do it, and that's important, I think, just to build the picture of why we've implemented some of the digital technology that we have in our business, and what we're trialling there and why we've done it, because it's all linked together. So Romani Pastoral Company consists of 4 farms. If I can get them to come up. Right. So Windy Station, which I'll talk a bit more about, as I said, next in the next little bit of the presentation. We also have Garangula, and I'm sorry about that white background. So Garangula Station, or Garangula, which is based down near Harden in the south. And so Garangula is the other property or Romani property involved in the pilot. And so there'll be other technology implemented down there. We've also a property, it's about 60 kilometres west of Windy, Mandeville, which is a beef, cattle and dryland cropping production farm, so it's summer and winter production. And then we've got Brawlin Springs in the south as well at Cootamundra. So Romani essentially is a family-owned, it is a family-owned operation. The family reside in Europe but also have quite a bit of time in Australia as well and have connections back to Australia. They've been invested in Australian agriculture for more than 30 years, so they're not newcomers to the game. They've been here for quite some time, and they know and understand Australian agriculture now, and the vagaries that brings, and also the upside that brings. So they've been here for a while. The 4 farms each have a independent manager. And each farm is run as its own business as such. So each has its own P&L or profit and loss. Each has its own balance sheet, and it's all operated as one business. And that all obviously reports up to Romani Pastoral Company as a whole. We do collaborate somewhat. The 2 farms in the north, to an extent, share some equipment and things, and as likewise in the south, some labour and equipment moves between the 2. But essentially, we're 4 independent businesses that work as one. We don't have a value chain or a chain between the farms, that we don't breed in the north and move in the south or anything like that. So relatively independent. So Garangula's involvement in the project, their implementation or deployment of the devices will come now. Windy has had most of the devices deployed now and are in place, and Garangula will follow. I'll talk a lot, as I said, about Windy because I know what Windy's about and I understand it. Garangula is facing, and as Romani as a whole, face very similar issues down at Garangula, and we've covered off with similar technologies down there. Garangula run quite a few sheep as well for both wool and lamb production, so there are some different issues that will be covered off in that part of the pilot as well. So I'll start to talk about Windy now. So Windy, as Darryl said, 21,500 hectares. It consists of 2 properties, non-contiguous properties. So Windy Station and Warra Station. And we run that as one business. So it's known as Windy Station, and when I refer to that, that's what I'm referring to the 2 farms as a whole. So Windy and Warra share the same profit and loss and balance sheet. We share cattle, so cattle move between the 2 farms. We share people, so people move between the 2 farms. Plant and equipment moves between the 2 farms, so we haven't gone and set up a whole other lot of plant equipment and business on the other station, Warra. We actually, it's quite fluid, and we move quite regularly between the 2, and cattle do as well. Windy is about 15,500 hectares, of which there's about 9,000 hectares of cash cropping, what we term as cash cropping. So, and that's the typical Liverpool Plains, which is a deep verticile soil, very significant water holding capacity, very fertile soils when it rains, and so it's about 9,000 hectares of that, balanced grazing, and the grazing ranges from the black soil plains up into some relatively rough ridge country. Warra is about 6,000 hectares, and it's located it's fence to fence about 15 k's east of Windy, and it's about 6,000 hectares, of which we've got about 1,000 hectares of cash cropping. So both farms have a cropping component. The distance across from point to point, east to west, as you can see, is 37 kilometres. North to south on Windy is about 18 or 19 kilometres point to point. So there's a big distance we cover, and we cover that with not a lot of people. And and we've also got the issue of the cropping and grazing country being dispersed between the areas. Warra less so. So most of the northern part of Warra is grazing. But Windy certainly has grazing country interspersed with the cropping country, which makes things difficult to manage at times. So moving cattle around, there's big distances to cover with that, travelling big distances and people moving around those places. So that's one of the bigger issues we face there. We do get some geographic spread. So the climate at Windy is quite different to the climate at Warra. So average annual rainfall over at Warra is about 720 mils, and you come back to Windy, it's about 620 mils. So there's a bit of a difference there, and that's due to elevation. So two different climates as such, and we can have rain on one side and not on the other, and over Windy we can have rain at the top and not at the bottom, certainly during summer as well. As Daryl said, I arrived at Windy in 2017, so I've been there about 2.5 years. I don't want to dwell on the past, but I think it's important to understand where we're going now as to where it was when I started there. So when I arrived, the beef enterprise consisted of, hopefully you can read it, so we had a beef enterprise there, and the primary focus of that was 3,000 head feedlot, and that feedlot was supplying Woolworths at the time when I arrived. That feedlot had grown from something that was set up sort of 30 or 40 years ago as an opportunistic facility to value add grain or cattle into something that was a consistent operation. So that was cattle going out every week to Woolworths. And if you can't read that one, so the feedlot was essentially the tail wagging the dog, is how I've termed it at Windy. So we had a 3,000 head feedlot, but everything it seemed on the farm was all focused around the feedlot. And so all of the beef enterprise was essentially set up around that, or soon to be. So there was a breeding herd there when I arrived, which was sort of going in all sorts of different directions, it seemed there. There was not sort of any sort of plan that I could find. And then there was a backgrounding operation, so it was supplying the feedlot, so buying cattle. So lots of ground devoted to the backgrounding as well as the breeding enterprise. We had a dryland and irrigated cropping enterprise. Again, most of the decisions were centred or had drifted to the way they were centred around the feedlot. So we were growing lots of fodder. So there was lots of fodder production, and we're growing things like triticale, which were centred around going towards the feedlot, but didn't really have a market outside of that. So if we didn't consume it there, we didn't really have anywhere other than some dairy farmers on the north coast to go to. And that led to a lack of rotation, so things were quite reactive. The planning was quite poor, and there was, in my opinion, a poor crop choice, hence things like triticale. When I arrived, there was also the staff and the culture had been allowed or had developed into a pretty, it wasn't a nice place to be. The culture was quite bad, and the staffing, there were good people there, but we needed to work through that. So there'd been a turnover of management as far as my position goes, and each time one of those managers came in, there was a new plan, and everyone got excited about that, and then that person left, and then we all went back and we started again. So that was quite difficult for the staff, and that was evident by the culture and the staff that were there at the time. The business had grown to supporting 23 full-time labour units, which was an enormous group of people. And there were plenty of contractors as well as that, so there was 23 full-time, but then we had all these add-ons as well. So the business had grown into this enormous thing, and there was just people doing stuff that really didn't add much value, and some people that were doing stuff that I didn't even know what they were doing actually, and I don't think they did. And then also within that, and hence the bad culture and the bad culture and the structure was that there'd been a whole heap of silos developed. So there was a farming team, there was a livestock team, there was a feedlot team, there was a, if you can believe it, a maintenance team. Each one of those had a manager or someone that self-appointed a manager, and each one of those didn't talk to the other manager or any of the other team. And if you had a barbecue, you could tell who was in each team because they'd go and sit with each other and talk about each other, and it wasn't a nice place to be. And also there was ineffective infrastructure, plant and equipment, and that wasn't through lack of capital investment. It was a lack of capital investment in the right areas, in my opinion. So we had two shiny, great big 380 horsepower tractors for the farming, which got used for 1,000 hectares of cropping, whilst our contractor did 4,000 hectares. And we were still driving around in a John Deere tractor with 30,000 hours at the feedlot, where we needed that thing to go every day, and that was driving around there. So the investment had been made in one area, but it hadn't been done in the other, and that was leading to huge inefficiencies in the business. So and the feedlot mill had got to a point where it was you'd wait for the next issue to happen, and we were managing around the issue happening rather than managing around getting rid of the thing. So it was a business that was sort of floundering. It was it's like the Titanic. It's a big business, huge business, but it was floundering and it didn't have a plan. It was rudderless, and there were people, as I say, going off with all sorts of authority to do things that just you wonder why they got there, but they just didn't have a plan, and they didn't have any structure to the business. So what we had to do as a business was stop that and start to implement a plan and set up a trajectory that we could go with, and that we were happy with, but also our owners were happy with, because they were not happy, as you'd expect, with the way this was going. So we sat down and we worked out on a big picture basis what this would look like, because I knew that this would take time, and I didn't want to go and implement a whole heap of new stuff off the hip. We needed to take some time and work through it, and so we did. And so we started with the big stuff, and we could find some things that we thought needed changing immediately, and we worked through the other stuff as we went. So the feedlot was one thing that was just a huge drain on the business, so we've actually closed that feedlot. There were some plans to extend it and make it bigger, which it's this thing seems in agriculture, if you can't do it well on a small scale, just make it bigger and that'll fix it. But it doesn't work. Well, I haven't seen it work. So we shelved that, and we closed the feedlot, and we focused it back onto the beef herd and the cropping. And what we also did then was to set some targets, and we went out to have a look and see what others could do, and we did some benchmarking, and we looked at some benchmarking figures, and we came up with a figure of a 4% return on assets. And so that was okay. That's sort of for us, that sort of starting point in agriculture. If we're not doing that, we probably shouldn't be really there. So we set that as our benchmark, but that's lower than what we'll get to eventually, and we've got a longer term target of higher than that, but we're starting at quite a low base, and there was quite a bit of work to do. So we went for just above average, but not too far. We weren't stretching ourselves too far. And we took that to the owners and said, okay, we're going to set a plan to achieve a 4% return on assets. Are you happy with that? And they were happy with that. And when we achieve it, they'll be even happier, I'm sure. But we sat down and then we made a 5-year plan around that. So each paddock on Windy and Warra, and I think there's about 150 or 180 paddocks, we went down and we mapped out what we were going to do for the next 5 years. So we've got all of our cropping country, we've got a rotation now, and set out for the next 5 years what our rotation looks like. And what we've done is block country up and make it work. And then we know now that if we've got country that's going to be in cropping for 5 years, we treat it that way. If the fence falls down around the outside, we don't replace it if we don't need to, because we're not going to be grazing that country. And then other country that we have, we can plan that out as well. And that linked into a pasture renovation program and all that sort of thing. So, and part of that was also working out what we were going to do with the beef herd and projecting numbers out for 5 years to make sure we're meeting targets, that target that we'd set ourselves. And so that's been done, and it's a dynamic plan, so we didn't just produce it, sit it on the shelf, and we'll go back in 5 years and do another one. That changes every week at the moment because of the cropping particularly. The rotation changes, so as we drop things out, we change the rotation further on. So, and I'll talk a bit more about that in the cropping section. But it's an important part of what we do now. Is we've all got a plan and we all know where we're going, or we should all know where we're going. So the two enterprises we're persisting with were the beef herd and the cropping. So the beef herd, we'd set ourselves the 4% return on assets target, which is the ROA there. So when we work out, and we'll get to this, but earnings before interest and tax, which is the EBIT part, is the way we compare ourselves to others on a profit basis. So that's essentially our profit. So we needed, to achieve a 4% return on assets, we needed an EBIT, or an earnings before interest and tax, of greater than $30 a DSE, and so DSE being a dry sheep equivalent. So that was our target, and so what we needed to do was set a beef herd up around that target, and we knew what we were trying to achieve. But to achieve that $30 a DSE, based on benchmarking data, we're in the top parts of the beef herd nationally as far as returns go or profit go. So we couldn't just have a half decent system. We had to have something that was pretty robust, and we've gone about trying to set that up. So I and the greater team at Windy are focused on these profit drivers. This is what gets us, or keeps us going, and we link everything we do gets linked back to what these major profit drivers. And so I just realised, and as Darryl said, I did work in banking, which is full of acronyms, and I've filled this presentation up with them too. So COP means cost of production, or stands for cost of production, kilograms of beef per DSE, and labour efficiency. So to us, they're the key areas that we focus on, and they're what's going to drive us towards that EBIT, or earnings before interest and tax figure. And the more profitable producers are doing and focusing on those things well. So to achieve those things, I'll just go back. So cost of production, there were lots of costs in the business that could be carved back, and we've done some of that. We've still got a little bit to do there, but we've pretty much done what we can there. And the issue around cost of production, it's a ratio between cost and production, so it captures a lot of stuff in the business. And so if we go and just wholesale cut costs, we can affect our productivity or production side. So we needed to keep that in mind, but we have got back towards where we need to be on the cost of production, and we're aiming for $1 to $1.20. We're sort of sitting probably at $2 to $2.50 at the moment. We sat down and worked out what we think, and this is based on our 5-year plan of what we think the Windy business is capable of from a grazing perspective, stocking rate wise, and we're thinking 9 DSEs per hectare is where we can be, and when we get to that, that's about 95 to 100,000 DSEs, and that's on a winter grazed hectares basis. So that'll fluctuate between 100,000 to 120, 30, 50,000 at times. So, and that equates to about a 4,500 cow breeding herd, which is a pretty significant herd for our area. Some of the guys from Northern Queensland probably think that's a small hobby block, but for us that's a big operation, big scale. We moved to a spring calving, so the original beef herd, there was an autumn and winter calving, autumn and spring calving, joined for any length of time. If the cow didn't have a calf in the autumn herd, she got another go in the spring herd, and I think some of them spent their time just going between the two without having a calf anywhere. But so we pulled the autumn calving cows were actually sold 12 months ago, just on the basis of feeding. And so we've now moved to a spring calving on the 15th of August. And I've got the question mark, I have the question mark there, because August technically isn't spring, but it's a lot closer to spring than what the people that claim their spring calving in June is. So we're spring calving it on the 15th of August, and we're also not quite sure whether that's the right time. We're collecting some data at the moment, and we wish there was something in the technology project that would collect that, because we were out counting calves, just counting calves in a paddock for this calving period to try and work out where we're trying to calve is the right time, and we'll work through that. But that could get later. Most people are trying to bring it earlier, but we're trying to move it later. And that's about matching the calving with supply of pasture primarily. We mate for 6 weeks, and we just had our first 6-week calving period. That's come back from 9 to 12 weeks, somewhere there, was what was there when I first started. So we're mating for a 6-week period. We joined at 2% bulls, so which is, you know, we're very comfortable with. We could actually probably go a little bit higher than that, but 2%'s good for us. Every bull goes through a breeding soundness evaluation every year to make sure that they're sound for joining. At that sort of percentage, we need to make sure they're right. We buy our bulls based on EBVs, and we go to a couple of bull sources, and we've got a lineup of specs on our EBVs that we want to buy, and we go to them. They say, yep, we've got this group of bulls, and it's just a genetic package. There's 20 bulls in this, and they match that, and off they go. We're also, and hence the photo, on a black baldy system. So we started, the herd when I arrived was primarily Angus, people sort of question at times the move towards a black baldy system from an Angus, given those big price premiums that are out there for the Angus cattle. There's a wealth of data from probably starting in the 50s or 60s in the US, and a lot from Australia, and a lot of evidence to suggest that black baldy system and the heterosis benefits of that are real. And there's a whole heap of information now coming to hand, and they're still trying for some reason to keep trialling it, but the information's there to say the black baldy system is the system from a productivity perspective, and we do capture the heterosis. There's benchmarking figures now that suggest that black baldy herds are producing the profits that we're trying to achieve. So we're confident that we can take the hit of 20 cents a kilo on our non-Angus steers as they go off to a feedlot, if that's what's prevailing at the time, because our productivity benefits are way in front of that, as far as a benefit to our business and hence profit. So yeah, we're confident that system will work. And the aim of this whole system is just a simple system of steers going off at 480 to 500 kilos. They have spring on mum, weaned, go onto some grazing crop over winter, spend the spring with us again, and then hopefully go on before Christmas into a feedlot or finished to go into a slaughter, sort of lightweight slaughter market. Unfortunately, for the last 2 years, we haven't achieved that. Just with dictated by seasonal conditions, their steers have gone off a lot earlier than that and a lot lighter than that, which is unfortunate, but we'll get there. I know we're in an MLA event, but we are a real mixed operation. I'm sure there's the panel this morning, and I'm sure other mixed businesses in here. Cropping takes up about half of the operating area, so it's a significant impact. It has a significant impact on our business, so it's a very important part of our operation. That's what we're aiming to do, grow some money. So again, the 4% return on assets figure, and we go back to an EBIT based on, for instance, based on a hectare rather than a DSE. And so we're looking for that sort of figure. In the cropping country that we have, as I said earlier, we've got the ability to store quite a bit of moisture, and we can store over 200 mils of water in our profile. And so our most profitable system includes some long fallow. So if we look at the way our rotation's set up now, including the long fallow, in any 12-month period, we're cropping about 80%, and this is based on an average year when we've actually got some water in the profile, but 80% of our area will actually be cropped. So what that means to us is if we're targeting $280 a hectare, we need to actually achieve $350 from that 80%, if that makes sense. So we're working on a $350 EBIT, and that has eliminated a lot of cropping or potential cropping options, simply on the basis that we could grow a crop, and there's a couple, mung beans are one of them. We could grow mung beans, and 1 year out of 10 we'd probably hit that, and the other 9 we'd be tearing cash up. And we don't need to burn moisture and burn cash when we're trying to achieve those sorts of returns on assets. So there are some agronomic reasons to step into some of those crops, and we'll do that if we need to, but that EBIT figure is the target we're going for. And what that does is focus us on the crop selections and how we do our rotations. So we focus again on the profit drivers, and we need to because of the way the system is. And by chance and surprisingly, it's about productivity and the cost involved in that productivity. So we're just measuring yield, and it's not the maximum yield; it's about the optimum yield and linking that into the cost of that production. And cropping, we collect a lot of data, and we're talking about technology. We collect lots of data in cropping because we've got a machine lots of times going over. And I've seen plenty of places where we've gone off with variable rate technology, for example, in our fertiliser use, and we get all excited about that. And when we look at it, you're still not putting your crop in on time, and that in cropping, timing is the big thing. And so people get focused on all this little stuff that's making no difference at all, and forgetting about the big stuff. And so it's the basics right, and as I say, it's timing for us. And we've got, because there's me and 7 others in the business that can make a decision on cropping, we've got some planting rules so that I don't lose my marbles and start planting stuff everywhere that's not profitable. And so we can keep ourselves in check. And so when we go out and measure how much moisture we've got a minimum target for different crop types, and if we don't have that in the soil profile at the time that window is open, then we just don't plant it. We wait for the next opportunity, because we can't afford to not achieve that $350 a hectare, or at least put ourselves in a position where we're likely to achieve that. So there's some planting rules, and around that is measuring soil moisture, and that's another area where we're trying to implement some technology where we can actually quantify that, because at the moment it's me hanging off a moisture probe. Our agronomist is not quite as big as me, and he can't push it as hard. So I'm saying there's 80 centimetres, he's saying 60, and it's quite subjective at the moment. And that, if we've got rules in place, we need an objective measurement there to make that work. Sounds easy, but it's not quite as easy as that to get that technology there or that quantifiable data there. And then we've also got some potential for some irrigation development, and the irrigation infrastructure that's there is quite dated. It's inefficient. So we're working on redeveloping that, but that's another step down the track. So I'll go back to the original slide we were saying about culture and people, and there was 23 people. There's now 7 full-time equivalent staff members, and for the more astute people in the crowd who are saying there's actually 8 people in that photo, you're right. Nat in the front there in the blue shirt comes in one day a week and does some bookwork for us. So she happened to be there that day, and we captured her in the photo. But the other 7 are the full-time people there at the moment, and it's really, and we've heard it this morning, it's really, really important that this stuff's right. The people, without those 7 people, or the 6 other than me, nothing happens. So we can implement all the technology we want. We can set all these visions and targets and all that sort of stuff. If those 7 people don't keep coming and they're not inspired to be there, then we may as well not even bother, because it's not going to work without them. And we're really fortunate now. We've got 7 people that do want to be there, and they really want to see things happen, and they want to be there long term, which is great. And I'm really excited about it. And that development of those people is the core of what we do now, because without them we're stuffed. So as I say, we're really lucky we've got them. There's 5 people in that photo that actually were there when I arrived, and they went through quite a period before I got there and quite a period after that was pretty tough. And that shows to me and demonstrates what the passion that they've got for the business and why they're still there. They're a dedicated group of people, and we'll keep continuing to develop that culture. We can't stop with that. So yeah, a great part of the story, I think. So we're approached, as we've discussed, to be the second part of or the second stage, if you like, of the digital livestock pilot program. As I said in the introduction, we were looking at that time for to implement some technology. So it was a great time to be involved, and it gave us an opportunity to find some of the solutions that we were looking for. And we were very clear at the start, and it hasn't been not this. At the start, what we had was a list of problems, and we wanted to find solutions. We didn't want to go the other way of someone coming to us with a solution that needed a problem, and we go and match them up, because that's stepping away from what we were doing as far as our targets for return on assets and things. So we had the problems, we wanted the solutions, and we've managed to do that, which is maybe slightly different to what was done at Carwoola last year. So the first major issue for us was water monitoring, and so we rely on bore pump to tanks, reticulated to trough systems, and 99% of our grazing country is reliant on those systems. So we actually spend 4 days a week. So if you look at it as a full-time equivalent, 4 days a week minimum, driving around, checking on troughs and tanks at the moment. So that involves 3 days during the week and 1 day on a weekend. So we have a weekend roster of people that come into work on a weekend and go around and check troughs, which to me, if we go back to those 7 people in that photo, they're much more intelligent than that, and I can have their time spent in a much more efficient and effective way than driving around looking at troughs full of water. So I want them to be doing other stuff, and they want to be doing other stuff, but we unfortunately can't, because we have to do that water run. Most of the time we're driving around, it's dead time. We're just driving around looking at a full trough, as I say. If you do a bore run on Windy and Warra, 200 k's is about the minimum you can do it in. That's if everything goes well. If things don't go so well, you can spend an extra few kilometres, and that's lots of kilometres, going up and down hills and round roads that aren't so nice, doing extra kilometres. But even just based on 200 kilometres, a bore run 4 times a week, vehicle costs, fuel costs, just a simple back of the envelope calculation, I think there's about $100,000 to $120,000 to be gained if we can make that water run more efficient. So there's a big potential win there for implementing some technology if we can get it right. So that was number one we came up with. Pasture monitoring was the other, and Darren's touched on that. As I said in the beef side, we're moving, at the moment, our stocking rates are down about 4 to 5 DSEs per hectare. We're going to go up to 9. That's a pretty significant shift. At the moment, I'd almost say we're doing it reasonably comfortably, in that things sort of got some comfort in there that we can move things around and things don't fall apart quickly. As we increase that stocking rate, we sail closer to the wind, things do fall apart quickly, and so we need to be onto that pasture monitoring and our budgeting. We also have some pastures that are less than easy to assess. So we've got some paddocks there that are 400 and 500 hectares, so it's hard to assess those. The next one was weather and climate monitoring, and that was sort of a link back into the pasture to some extent, but also that geographic diversity across the two farms and within the farms. We wanted to be able to measure that, and we also used the weather monitoring information for things like spraying and that sort of thing as well. So we wanted to be able to manage that. Animal monitoring was something that we highlighted, and at the moment we've implemented some GPS tracking on the bulls, which Darren sort of touched on, but we think there's a bit more there for that. And then was also commodity and input management, and that's around mainly for us diesel management and grain management, and I'll delve into these a bit more as we go through. What we didn't implement at this stage, not in all cases because there wasn't something there, but mostly in cases because there wasn't something there that we could see at this stage that was the return on assets or the return that we were looking for. So the one of those is fencing, and there was two components to that. One was the establishment of new fencing, and so there's the virtual fencing, and Darren's going to trial that, which is good. But things like virtual fencing, is that the way to replace a new fence, or should we just keep going with the new fencing which we've got? But then also monitoring existing fences. So we spend a lot of time driving around looking at fences to see whether a tree hasn't gone over them or that sort of thing. Security was another one. Surveillance of the farm. So we've got less people there than what we had before. So trying to keep a check on that. We do have a couple of entrances that are onto the farms, and we try and monitor those. But a security would be good. Some of the cameras we were finding were expensive, but I think we're now moving into a realm where those are becoming much more cheaper to implement, and so we might be able to get that fixed. Safety was another one. So we use on the cropping model, we use a full contract model. So things like people being on farm spraying and I'm not knowing that they're there. We use text in and out and things like that, but that's difficult. Again, finding the right one. So we were thinking about GPS tracking, but you need to go and implement a system that Martin's Transport would have, which is very expensive just to answer a safety question. So the current practice is actually probably more cost effective. Animal monitoring, which you know that we have done, but I think things like calving monitoring. So we monitor all our heifers over calving. That's a big cost from a labour perspective. So also condition scoring, weighing, so the walkover weighing, that sort of thing. I think there's still some room for that technology. Just whether we can get it to work and work on the basis that we want it to. And then we've also got weed control, and similar to Darren, we've got some issues with some invasive species, with some tiger pear and things like that are really hard to spray. And if we could have a sprayer or an autonomous sprayer going out and spraying those, would be fantastic, and I'm sure the team would be very happy with that. We can do the green on brown, which is in our fallow cropping. We use a weed it sprayer, which is and that's well-worn technology. It's 20 years old now, but the green on green seems to be a bit more difficult. They're getting there, and they'll get there. It's just a matter of time, and then making that autonomous, then it'll be even better. So as far as the actual pilot goes, so from a water monitoring perspective, we, similar to Carwilla last year, sent out to service providers. We selected 12 that will go across both windy and granular, 12 service providers. So they're 12 different types of units that will go on tanks and troughs. We at Windy, out of that, have 7 different providers. So there'll be 7 different types of technology or different types of devices that will be implemented across Windy, or has been implemented across Windy. So in total, there's 29 water tank monitors, and that actually covers every water tank on Windy and Warra, which is great. So we've got 29 of them out there now, and most of them are working or will be working in the next week or so. We managed to deploy about 43 water trough monitors, which is about a third of the water troughs on Windy and Warra combined. So budgetary, obviously we couldn't do the 120 troughs in one hit, but we've got 43 and we're testing those in areas where we think that they'll be tested. We've also got some water flow monitors, and we'll see what they can deliver as well. Here's a range of different solutions, so water monitoring solutions. So your left, there's different types of tank monitors on two different types of tanks, and then there's a water trough monitor. The water trough monitor ones, as Darren said, the service providers come out and, that's what the trough looks like, and they've all been quite inventive in the way that they've tried to mount the monitors onto the trough. Sorry, so that's an example of one way that one of the companies have applied it. Pasture monitoring, there's two service providers for Romani, one being Seabay Labs, which Darren's shown you a bit of and I'll show as well, and then we're also using Fluorosat to see if we can get some good data out of that as well. As we've talked about, getting around and assessing pastures and budgeting based on that is quite hard work, and we've accelerated more so than Darren in our distances and things that we have to cover. So there's some big wins there, I think. This is a cut out of the same Seabay Labs information that Darren had. I've just taken a screenshot there of that's Windy and Warra, and it shows us total dry matter across the paddocks. The different colours mean different amounts of dry matter, and then we can click on and get more detail. That hopefully will be where we get to. We've got a lot of calibration work to do with Seabay Labs, and we'll get there. So it's pretty exciting to be involved in that. One of the things that obviously that gives us a quantity, but we don't get quality in pasture composition, which Darren talked about as well. But that hopefully will come. So weather and climate. So 9 service providers across Romani, and that's for rain gauges, soil moisture probes. Windy has 5 dedicated weather stations. So weather stations collecting not only rainfall but wind speed, direction, delta T, humidity, that sort of thing. So that's handy. 8 rain gauges spread across Windy as well, which tries to capture that geographic spread. We've also got 9 soil moisture probes at Windy, and what we're trying to do there, in combination with the weather station data and the pasture growth data, is maybe to try and link that up and make some sort of predictive and useful information out of that. There's some examples. So weather station on the left, 2 soil moisture probes and different types of soil moisture probes in the middle, and then just a single rain gauge on the right. Animal monitoring, IDS company have been engaged to tag our bulls, and we pick the bulls, 100 bulls on Windy and Warra, pick the bulls, higher value animals with the tags in. Similar to Darren, we want to know if there's one of them laying under a tree because he's been injured, or the major one for us is that we want to know he's in the right paddock, because they tend to have a ability to change paddocks regularly, and that takes us time to go out and do that. So IDS have a great setup where we can put the bulls into the paddock, virtual, put the bulls in the paddock, and there's an alarm when they jump out of the paddock or not in that paddock. So fantastic technology. We can then go out and fix that up. That's just so we put the tags into the 100 bulls last Wednesday, and that's Julian from IDS putting those in. That's what the tag looks like on the right there, and those bulls went out on Thursday and Friday. This is just it's similar to what Darren had up. The bull tags actually came from Brisbane, so you can see the lines coming in from the north, which is the top of the page. They were the tags coming in from Brisbane. Then we implanted the tags, and then the bulls went to Warra, which is the lines going to the right. So they were working so far, which is good. And the 11 that are out there to the north, and the 3 that are up to the north are out in paddocks out there. So we can then delve deeper into that as we need to. Commodity input management. So we've put some grain silo level monitors in, which will allow us to keep track of silo movements. Fuel tank level monitors, and as part of this we're also putting in a fuel management system. So at the moment we've got a pretty pretty crude way of capturing our information on who fills up with fuel and when. The fuel management system will be a tag in, tag out type situation where you need to tag before you can open the pump to pump in, and it'll ask you for some information so we can link it to vehicles and people and that sort of thing, which will be really good because it takes some time to do that each month when we do a fuel return. That's just a tank level monitor on the top of a diesel tank. So bringing it all together, we're currently using AgriWeb, and we have been for about 12 months now. We also think that maybe one platform's enough. We think we might not need 15 different people all having their own platform. We're trying to bring as much of the information we can into AgriWeb from the service providers. And the idea behind that is that the team then has access to that and can pull that up, and it's easy to say, okay, is that tank full or empty? As Darren's alluded to, we can then use the other platforms that people have to delve further into the detail behind that. So we're working with AgriWeb, and AgriWeb actually are working with the service providers to make that hopefully work, and that'll, as the devices come online, that'll happen. So the future for us, it's a really great opportunity, as I said, to test a lot of these technologies in a commercial setting and at scale. So we probably offer a bit more from the scale perspective than Karwoola does, so it's on a larger geographic spread. First step, we'll get the installs done at Windy, and then we'll then move to Garangula and we'll get them installed there and working, which is important, obviously, to have them working. And then once we get the information and the information starts to flow, and hopefully in 12 months' time we can come back and say, well, okay, this is what we've found, similar to what Darren did at Karwoola, and it'll have a economic outcome from what we've actually implemented, and I can then come back and tell you if we manage to eliminate the $100,000 in water monitoring. And that's it. Thank you.